So, welcome everyone, our members and our guests today to the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies, New South Wales, and to our monthly lunchtime lecture. I'd also like to acknowledge and extend a special welcome to one of our vice patrons who is with us today, Major General Matt Burr, the Commanding Officer, Commander of the 2nd Australian Division. So can I say it's our distinct honour to have you with us today. We truly value your ongoing support of RUSI, and we are delighted that you can join us for today's presentation, so welcome. Now, our lecture today will be delivered by Brigadier Alison Creagh, who is the Representative Colonel Commandant of the Royal Australian Corps of Signals, and who will be introduced by Vice President Ron Lyons.
Thanks, Kim. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 8th of our monthly lecture series for 2025. As Kim has said, the title of today's lecture is the Royal Australian Corps of Signals, and it'll be presented by Brigadier Alison Creagh, AM, CSC, the Representative Colonel Commandant of the Royal Australian Corps of Signals. Brigadier Creagh joined the Army Reserve in 1981, was commissioned from OCS Portsea, and has had over 34 years of reserve and regular service. Her operational postings have included UNTAC in Cambodia, Interfet in East Timor, Iraq and ISAF in Afghanistan. Further postings included the Director General of Strategic Communications, ADF. Her other post-service roles have included the Council of the Australian War Memorial, the ACT Ministerial Advisory Committee for Veterans and their Families, President of Rowing ACT, and rowing coach for the Invictus Games. She is currently involved in the preparation for the centenary celebrations of the Royal Corps of Australian Signals here in November this year. Would you please welcome Brigadier Alison Creagh to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Ron, for those welcome remarks. Firstly, my apologies for being late. I had a cancelled flight out of Canberra, followed by a delayed flight out of Canberra. Quick leap out in the back room, and I'm here and very, very pleased to be with you this afternoon. Could I acknowledge our First Nations people and pay our respects, in particular those First Nations people who have served in the Australian Defence Force for over a century. I'd also like to acknowledge our military members here today and thank you for your service, and also for our families. Important for me to reflect on the fact that you serve with us. Thank you for what you do serving alongside us. For me, this presentation today is special. It's special for a few reasons. Firstly, this year marks a centenary for the Royal Australian Corps of Signals. I'm a proud Signals officer, as you can see, as the Representative Colonel Commandant for the Corps. Think of me as a senior mentor for the Corps, and it's an appointment from the Chief of Army. I've been doing it since 2018, and it's an absolute privilege to serve alongside and continue to serve with our young women and men who protect us every day. As I reflected on the preparation for today's presentation, it struck me that it's actually 34 years, Ron, it's 40 years, Ron, more than the 34 that I've served. So it's, when you put it in context, 40 years out of 100, that's quite a lot of the century that I've been involved in. And so for me, there's lots of memories that this brings back when I actually think of what the Corps of Signals has done over the century. So today, if you don't mind, with your indulgence, I'll actually talk a little bit about my Signals experience at various points, plus reflect on what the Corps has done and how it's changed across the century. So really today, because it's our century, we'll touch on what we've done, our journey across a century. So firstly, some history. Military commanders have always needed the fastest and most reliable and secure communications possible so that we can gain an advantage over the enemy. Signallers deliver these military communications. That has been since time immemorial. The history of signals in Australia can be traced back to the 1800s across the Australian colonies. And indeed, Australia has the unique distinction of having the first regularly formed signals organisations in the British Empire, with New South Wales and Victoria establishing a torpedo and signals corps. So notable from a New South Wales perspective. South Australia also had a signalling corps. However, when the Australian Army was raised on the 1st of March 1901, we didn't have dedicated signals units. Instead, the regiments had their own regimental signallers within each unit. An Australian Corps of Signals was formed in January 1906, but it didn't last for long. With the introduction of universal training in 1911, the Australian Corps of Signallers was disbanded and subsumed into the Australian Corps of Engineers. The first Australian Imperial Force, Australian Corps of Engineers, titled their signallers sapper signallers or engineer signallers, and they communicated on the battlefield during the First World War, largely relying on telephone networks, connecting trenches with line, and also connecting the bunkers and the headquarters positioned in the rear. So our forebears did a lot of the sorts of things that we still see today, interestingly enough. They used semaphore, flashing lights, flags, Morse and carrier pigeons as communications techniques. They had signals dispatch riders and runners who delivered messages. Some of these techniques are still in service today, some of them we might need again. This era also saw the introduction of wireless and other communication technologies, and so not surprisingly, from a communications perspective, we started to see a bit of an evolution in communications and how the signallers were communicating. I think important to reflect that this is we had the 110th anniversary of the Gallipoli landings this year on the 25th of April, and sapper signallers, when we think about what they were doing then, would have arrived on shore at Gallipoli on the 25th of April 1915 and immediately established a divisional signals office and laid wires between the divisional headquarters and the advanced brigades. These sapper sigs were under fire, constantly exposed to danger as they repaired telephone line or as runners relaying messages across the trenches. Signallers have a lot of work to do to communicate and are regularly in harm's way. There was such a demand for reliable communications during the First World War that by the end of the war there were more SIGs than there were engineers, and that was a really significant outcome. So in 1925 the Australian Corps of Signals was formed after separating from the Australian Corps of Engineers. So for us, 1925 really marked the start of our century of service as a Corps of Signals. So before I go on into more history, just some fun facts, I guess, about the Corps, for those who may not know. Our motto, Certa Cito, means swift and sure, and it reflects the intent of our Corps that communication be carried out with maximum speed and certainty. We do this every day. And our Corps badge displays Mercury. Mercury's the messenger of the gods, and he carries a caduceus, a message stick, and Mercury's affectionately known as Jimmy. Our tactical colours are white on royal blue, and the ribbons around the caduceus represent the royal colours. Our domestic colours, sky blue, and dark green, represent the communications on air, sea and land. So themes all the way through on everything from our motto through to core colours would not be a surprise to you, but really an important reflection of what we do every day, that is communicate. Make sure that we connect our commanders to allow them to get the right information at the right time to the right people to prosecute the battle. So back to our history. So technology advanced, so did the Australian Corps of Signals. The Second World War saw great changes in terms of technology, increased use of radio waves and electronic warfare, and so we saw long-range communications popping up, and this really extended communications around the world. We saw a rapid expansion of the Signals Corps to a strength of 25,000 personnel, and this included the establishment and the growth of Army Special Wireless Group, which was the precursor to our Australian Signals Directorate. By 1941, Australia had raised an army approaching 500,000 soldiers, and our signallers served with distinctions in all theatres of war. A number of our signallers were prisoners of war, notably Colonel Lionel Matthews. Lionel Matthews trained as a signalman and was deployed to Singapore in February 1941 as a signals officer. He maintained cable communications under fire and was awarded the Military Cross. And when Singapore fell, he became a prisoner of war in Changi Prison. He was shipped to Sandakan and set up an elaborate intelligence organisation. And one of his initiatives was to construct a wireless transmitter. It's one of the hallmarks of signallers. They're always innovating and wanting to design things. Unfortunately, this wireless transmitter was detected, and Lionel Matthews was sentenced to death and executed by firing squad in March 1944. He was posthumously awarded the George Cross, a notable signaller indeed. There are many stories of signallers and their innovations, exploits and tenacity across many theatres of war, and I won't share too many of those with you, but another one that I want to reflect on is the women who served with distinction in the Australian Women's Army Service, or the AWARS. The AWARS served alongside their male counterparts in the Australian Corps of Signals, and these women played a vital role in the war effort, providing signal support and other specialist roles, including serving with the Army's Special Wireless Group. More than 3,600 women served with the Australian Corps of Signals during the Second World War, and these women served as Army signallers, telegraphers, Morse code operators and code breakers, intercepting and decoding enemy communications. You may have heard of the Garage Girls. These ladies were in Queensland and really the equivalent of the Bletchley Park code breakers. They worked discreetly out of a garage, hence the term Garage Girls, and their efforts behind the scenes provided vital intelligence. They were responsible for deciphering the details of Admiral Yamamoto's flight plans that then allowed his plane to be intercepted and shot down over Bougainville. The AWARS were disbanded at the end of the Second World War, and these women returned to running households. But for me, these impressive women working as signallers showed what we could do. And I think the Corps of Signals has gone a long way towards showing how women can be employed, even today, in a number of different roles, making a significant contribution to Army, the Australian Defence Force and our nation. So, back to our history. On the 10th of November 1948, in recognition of service throughout World War II, His Majesty King George VI conferred the title Royal on the Australian Corps of Signals, and we've carried that privilege ever since. Over the decades following World War II, members of the Corps have served with distinction in all operational areas in which Australian troops have been deployed during both war and peace. We're always there, always communicating and always connecting our commanders with our people deployed. In Korea, Malaya, Borneo, Vietnam, our signallers connected our deployed forces to other fighting nations and connected our forces to Australia using the leading technology of that era. And what I think is often overlooked is the signallers who served at home, the other end of the communications links, were just as important as those who were deployed on operations. These signallers are absolutely, as they are today, critical to ensuring that the messages are communicated. Our strategic signallers are as much a part of the mission or the operation as the signallers deployed overseas. Obviously not in harm's way in quite the same way, but working with reliability, endurance and resilience to ensure that the message always gets through. So, a couple of personal reflections from me. When I look back at my 40 plus years in the Corps, I remember starting as a young officer when we were still using tape readers to communicate. So technology's come a long way. Computers were just emerging, but they were massive, taking up whole floors rather than what you have on your smart device today. I learned to program in BASIC using punch cards. Don't think anyone knows what that is anymore. The strategic radio transmitter and receiver stations were large buildings. They had valve technology and they used antenna arrays that were massive, the size of, they were in large fields. And in Melbourne's Diggers Rest and Rockbank, there were two massive transmission and receiving stations, banks of these valve-based communications equipment that took up whole buildings, large buildings, 3 or 4 times the size of this room. And the antenna arrays were paddocks and paddocks and paddocks with sheep and cows and all that sort of stuff just wandering around. Now these antennas and transmission systems are really achieved with your mobile phone or miniature satellite systems that we transport in suitcases. So really, when you think about it, 40 years, the technology shift has been significant. And how you adopt that and keep evolving into an organisation like the Corps of Signals is full of challenges to try and achieve the best equipment with the best trained people. Being able to innovate and achieve is challenging at times, but men and women do us proud. You can give them a 50% solution and they'll make sure that they give you an 80% outcome. So innovation is one of the hallmarks of what signallers are renowned for. And not long after I joined the Army in 1986, we started to see the first, that's the regular Army, we started to see the first large computer terminals, as I said, the size of desks rather than what you now see or have access to. And these were really only in strategic communications unit. In the field communications units, those deployed, we were still using teletypes and antenna fields the size of a football field, and the shelters that we had were the size of a caravan. If I think about what we had in barracks, we still had typing pools, people continuing to type out messages and documents to then have them reproduced on Gestetner machines. I'm not sure the current generation of young people would even know what a Gestetner machine is nowadays. I think a few of you in the room know what I'm talking about. The introduction of satellites and desktop computers was pretty significant for our Corps, and it happened fairly soon after I joined. So in 1989, for Exercise Kangaroo 89, which is the equivalent of Exercise Talisman Sabre, the massive coalition exercise that they ran this year, K89 was a little smaller, not quite as many coalition partners, but it used satellites for the first time, and it was considered to be an absolute game changer. Satellites in the field, they were big, like really big, but satellites in the field was considered to be really significant. And to give you a bit of a sense of it, the high frequency radio systems that we used up until that time, at very most, could deliver data at 512 bits per second. So most of the time it was 256 baud or bits per second. In contrast, your smart device and modern computers and networks transmit data in the hundreds of megabits per second. So once again, in the space of 40 years, we've gone from the slowest possible crawling ones and zeros across the skywaves to actually being able to look at your smart device and get information right at hand. To keep up with this technology shift, as I said, very challenging. I remember having a desktop computer for the first time in 1993, and that was in Cambodia when we were deployed, and I was one of the lucky ones because most people didn't have a computer, but I was the quartermaster, so it had all our logistics accounts on it, and it was the most primitive of systems. It was a computer system and a desktop computer nonetheless. As an aside, the Corps of Signals employed women in field units from the mid-80s, and I was part of that generation that had the privilege of serving alongside my male colleagues on operations. I was one of the first women officers to serve in a field unit. We had a few female soldiers in my unit, not very many of us. I think there would have been half a dozen at most. The women, the soldiers, were mainly radio operators, drivers, and there was one technician, a bright young person who went on to become an officer. Actually, as an aside, the sister of Lieutenant General Susan Coyle, Alice Dillon. In my time, I saw signallers deployed on peacekeeping missions to Namibia, Cambodia, Somalia, Rwanda, Western Sahara, Bougainville and the Solomon Islands, to name a few. There were others, Haiti, we had people in Bosnia, Herzegovina. Large presence. Signallers served everywhere, using the technology available at the time, innovating where we needed to catch up with technology. Sometimes our acquisition systems can't give us state-of-the-art, so you're always trying to deliver a state-of-the-art effect with sometimes older equipment. I served in Cambodia as part of the Force Communications Unit, and we supported the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia. And the Force Commander at the time, Major General John Sanderson, described the Force Communications Unit as the glue that held UNTAC together. That's what signallers do. We bind everyone together and allow them to communicate. The Force Communications Unit had people in over 50 locations, from signallers supporting UN observers in small remote detachments. In particularly dangerous environments, we had signallers ambushed and under fire for protracted periods of time, all the way through to large communications nodes in key centres around Cambodia and supporting the UN headquarters. This is sort of a flavour of how we deploy and the type of effect that we will put into an operational area. We start with what we call a greenfield site with all of our greenfield radios, where we can turn up and establish communications anywhere without any infrastructure. And over time we will replace that traditionally with commercial off-the-shelf infrastructure, so that when we leave that people can still communicate, and we then go on and use our green equipment for the next operation. So we've been doing that now for a number of decades as part of our operational planning. More recently, our signallers have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. You may have heard of signaller Sean McCarthy, who was an electronic warfare specialist serving with the Special Air Service Regiment, who was sadly killed in action in the Chora Valley in southern Afghanistan on the 8th of July 2008. When his unit was pinned down, Sean broke cover, decided to climb a tree under fire and hoisted a panel to guide air support. His actions absolutely saved lives. This is what signallers do. They strive to communicate against all odds. And signallers have continued more recently to communicate and provide assistance during humanitarian disaster relief missions, such as the tsunami in Indonesia and the natural disasters in Australia. Signallers are there supporting recovery efforts in Australia when we get floods and other natural disasters. We were there in Cyclone Tracy, pretty close to the first ones in, to try and establish comms to allow the commanders to evaluate what they could do to help what was a raised community. So a potted history once over very lightly, otherwise we would be here for a long time. So who are we now? In our centenary year, it's fair to say that we remain at the forefront of telecommunications, information technology, electronic warfare, signals intelligence, and now cybersecurity. We provide communications for the Australian Army in support of the Australian Defence Force and any joint force that might be established for an operation. The men and women of our Corps are our competitive edge. They have been for a century. Army signallers continue to develop and respond to emerging technology as we have for over a century, and our role now is to provide signal support not just to the land domain, to Army and the ADF, but now also the cyber domain and in support of the space domain. We're a team of technical specialists that provides everything from communications, electronic warfare and cyber capabilities. And I have to say that when I visit signals units now and I go on exercises like Exercise Talisman Sabre, I walk into a unit and there's pretty much no equipment that I recognise, even though I only finished my full-time service in 2015. When I walked around the position a couple of years ago, the deployed force, and looked up, the only thing I recognised was the DON 10 cable, and that DON 10 was actually holding up other cables and wasn't doing anything except for operating as an attachment device. So it's a whole new world out there, and a lot of it I don't recognise. However, the principles remain absolutely true. We're there to fight to gain communications, fight to protect communications, and make sure that our commanders can communicate to our deployed forces. We have people deployed on operations right now, as you would expect, and I won't go into where they are, but I think it's actually fair to say that people at the strategic edge, all the way through to those deployed, are in a fight right now. Before I start to go through that story, I just want to reflect a little bit on our structures. So right now the Corps has 6 signal regiments, several independent signal squadrons that support our special operations forces, and the Sustainment and Fires Brigade and the Army Reserve Brigades. The 8th Signal Regiment supports the 2nd Division. In the early days of our century, communications units were squadrons, not regiments, and they had a lot of people in them doing a lot of valuable tasks. But I think it's fair to say even now we never have enough signallers to go around to do what we need to do. I think other Corps would say the same, by the way, but it is absolutely true for communications and the Royal Australian Corps of Signals. When I joined 40 years ago, we had specialists who were operator, keyboard, radio and cipher specialists, skilled at how fast they could send and receive Morse, type and use high-frequency radios, as well as VHF radios. They were referred to as chooks because the operators looked like chickens pecking away at their Morse keys. So the term chook is a very affectionate term for SIGs as well. We had other trades who were equally important in delivering an effect. Technicians, or techs as we call them, established our circuits. Linesmen or linies laid cables and line and erected antenna masts. Linies really an extension of the linesmen, the sapper SIGs, who laid cable in the First World War under fire. And our electronic warfare officers, or BEARS, who got their nickname because of the fact that when they put their headsets on, they looked like koala bears or koalas or bears, whichever way you want to describe it. But the BEARS still carry that nickname again, even today. We added operators op computers or geeks in the early 90s to reflect the fact that we were starting to play with computers. But now we have all of those sorts of trades, but we have signals officers, obviously. I'm one of them. Information systems operators who are called geeks. Battle communications specialists who are the old operators. Electronic warfare specialists, including who do signals intelligence as well as EW in the field, who are our bears, cyber warfare specialists, and telecommunications networks engineers, who are the equivalent of the technicians. So I touched on the fact that times have changed and we are, for all intents and purposes, in a fight right now. Space and cyber are now domains under the Australian Defence Force, and they stand alongside three traditional domains of land, air and maritime. In all cases, our signals play a part. I mentioned Lieutenant General Susan Coyle, who is our most senior signals officer, the first Lieutenant General the Corps of Signals has ever had, and Lieutenant General Coyle is the Commander Joint Capabilities responsible for the space and cyber domains. And what I'm going to cover now are extracts from a speech that Lieutenant General Coyle gave at an international conference relatively recently. And I think it shows the changing face of our Australian Defence Force, but also touches on how the Royal Australian Corps of Signals fits into the changing dynamic. So none of these statements will come as a surprise to you. Today's world demands that we move beyond the simple focus on numbers and types of warheads and delivery systems. We have to adopt a strategy that's much more around a posture of denial to deter potential adversaries from wanting to take action that would be harmful to Australia's interests and our region's stability. We have new technologies like cyber, weaponisation of space, and the ability to integrate nuclear weapons with autonomous systems. And that means that the traditional arms control frameworks that have been in play for many, many decades are now being overshadowed. And there's not really any method of control to understand how to operate against them. So we're developing a range of capabilities and technologies, not on our own, but with allies. But certainly in Australia, we have our own streams to develop unique capabilities and technologies, and that's around strengthening our cyber capabilities so that we can protect and defend our networks and our mission systems and our weapon platforms. We also see that space will play an increasingly important role in our future, with the intent of enhancing space capabilities essential to protecting our security in the future. Space-based situational awareness and advanced satellite communications are there right now, but they're always under threat. Space is no longer a benign domain. It's congested, it's contested, and there's always weaponry now that wants to target our space systems and any of the information that comes from our space systems. This really means that we've got to have counter-space capabilities, including anti-satellite weapons, jamming systems and spoofing technologies, and these have all changed the face of modern conflict as we know it. The satellites that provide secure communications, intelligence, surveillance and positioning, navigation and timing services, everything that we use on the ground, in the air and at sea, are all highly valued military targets and all under threat right now. So our networks and operational technologies really, for an adversary, present a vast opportunity. Illegitimate access and exploitation has the potential to disrupt or delay or prevent the deployment of the use of force. So it doesn't take much to put us at a standstill to prevent us from deploying if we needed to. Nation-state actors are relentless in targeting defence and any adjacent networks, and they do so right now as we speak. The threat's real, it's persistent, it's current, and it's considered that from a cyber domain perspective, we are in conflict right now. Grey zone warfare, as it's currently known. And we also know that what works today will not work tomorrow in the cyber battle space. We have to keep evolving, changing, and constantly shifting gear. This is the environment that our subject matter experts, our signallers, face. How do you adapt and how do you stay in front of, or at least adjacent to, the technology and the constant changes? It requires a lot of agility and thinking, it requires a lot of innovation, and it requires a lot of resolve and resilience to stay in front, or at least stay on par. We know that there's substantial data privacy and cyber breaches. They happen in civilian world, they're happening in the military world. They happen against reputable companies that invest a lot of time, effort and money to actually shore up against cyber threats. So it won't surprise you when I say that exactly the same sort of attacks are there, ever present, with people always trying to interfere with our military systems. We know that cyber attacks today are highly organised and coordinated operations, increasingly sophisticated. They are not just people hacking for the fun of hacking. They're with resolve and determination to affect us and everything that we do. They are increasingly being enabled by technologies such as artificial intelligence and, not surprisingly, often state-sponsored. So countries that want to change our way of life or interfere with our way of life. Information is highly valuable and requires protection. That's nothing new. That's been with us for all time. It is as old as warfare itself, really. But in this interconnected world that we have, quick access to accurate, secure information and infrastructure and services is absolutely essential to the military, and that is what the men and women of the Royal Australian Corps of Signals continue to strive to deliver. Cyber security threats can range from everything from large data leaks all the way through to targeted attacks on individuals. So when you think about it, as an individual, I can be targeted in my military persona as equally as I can in my civilian persona. And what does that do if every one of us is being targeted in the same way? Over time, it can absolutely jeopardise how we operate and our confidence in ourselves and our ability to fight. We need resolve and we need resilience. We need to dominate our cyber terrain to ensure our networks, systems and platforms can operate. We need to improve our posture to be effective and not just efficient. We need a cyber capability that is survivable in conflict, that can not only defend our networks but actually provide an opportunity to attack our adversaries. Conducting cyberspace operations in warfighting is warfighting in networks, both in ours and in our adversaries. Defensive operations prevent our adversaries from achieving advantage by maintaining our ability to operate and use our network systems and weapon platforms in conflict. Offensive cyber and information operations is all about imposing costs to our adversary, getting in the way of the adversary's time and space, allowing us to fight at a time of our choosing. So cyberspace operations set the conditions for combat in the physical warfighting domains of land, maritime and air. And our Royal Australian Corps of Signals operators, cyber operators, are at the very forefront of supporting cyber operations, and our signallers in the land domain are key to protecting and supporting our command and control networks. The threat is real, it's persistent and it's current. It's a little bit scary. And what we do is critical and important. So I just want to shift gear a little bit and talk about in our centenary year, a bit of a reflection on our historical numbers. So around 107,000 personnel have served in the Corps since the First World War, and during World War II we had about 25,000 men and 3,600 women serving as Army signallers. Since World War II, 42,000 SIGs personnel have served on operations. We always look for the best and brightest to serve as part of our Corps, and we have, I think, some of the most exciting science, technology, engineer, maths, STEM-based careers that are on offer in the Australian Defence Force. Just a quick think about cyber and space would lead you to that conclusion, I think. We think that there's over 300,000 family members and descendants of the Corps of Signals who remain connected to the Signals community in some shape or form. So we're not a small community. We consider ourselves to be relatively large, and at the end of the day, we try to communicate with each other and remain connected. Some would say less effectively than we do when we're actually deployed on operations, but we do remain connected. So today we have a workforce of about 3,000 trained personnel, around 2,500 in the regular Army and around 500 in the Army Reserve, all delivering those effects that I've talked about. So over the last century we've grown from semaphore to satellites and evolved from message forms to cyberspace. Quite a change, and I would argue that most of that change has happened in the last 4 decades. So when I look now at what our centenary year looks like, we started our centenary on the 14th of February 2025 at the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne. You'll recall that 2025 was the first time that we've permanently formed as the Australian Corps of Signals. On the 24th of February, which is the National Day for War Animals, and it happened to be the year of the pigeon this year, the head of Corps, Brigadier Dean Limmer, actually talked about pigeons at the Australian War Memorial, and there are images of him stroking a pigeon with a pigeon fancier in tow, telling him all about how the pigeons actually would deliver messages. So poignant for us when you think that pigeons are one of our very early forms of communications. In March, as part of International Women's Day, we had reflections on the women's contribution to the Corps through the AWARs and the Women's Royal Australian Army Corps. On Anzac Day, we were fortunate in a number of locations to be able to lead the marches or lead the army contingents for the marches in capital cities and regional centres, something that our community was very proud of. We've run a number of local and regional events across Australia trying to bind our current serving community together with our veterans and families, and I think there is a lot of pride in the Corps as we move towards what will be our culminating point in November. On the 8th of November, we will start 4 days' worth of centenary commemorative events and celebrations. Corps Day Parade will be right here in Sydney at Victoria Barracks on Saturday the 9th of November, and before that we are fortunate to have a Remembrance Sunday service here at the Anzac Memorial to pay our respects to our fallen and other members of the Australian Defence Force who have lost their lives. On the 10th of November we move to Melbourne. We have a number of centenary activities there centred around the Defence Force School of Signals, the home of the Corps. And on the 11th of November, we head to Gallipoli Barracks in Brisbane, where we'll see the Corps Week sports activities underway, Caduceus Cup, all the way through to inter-unit rugby, and a new fixture, the Mercury Dash, a mixed sprint relay carrying message sticks or batons to reflect the short form of running that you would have seen at Gallipoli all the way through to more recent operations. And then Olds and Bowls have a reunion at Healesville in Victoria from the 11th through to the 18th of November. So you can see that our community has embraced our centenary, and we're very much looking forward to the November events. A number of units have exercised the freedom of entry in their local areas and have been privileged to do so, and some of our Signals units have had notable birthdays this year, a few from the Vietnam era, around 60 years of age, and those organisations have recognised their birthdays as part of the centenary. So that's really the core, but supporting the core we have a charity called the Certicido Foundation, which I have the privilege of being president of, and it's a charity that supports Signals community, those who are serving currently, former serving, along with our families. But we extend that to those Army Corps that serve alongside us. So RA6 units don't just have SIGs in them, they have other Corps, Transport, Ordnance, RAMI, to name a few. So important that those Corps that serve alongside us are also supported. And equally, we don't go on operations without communications support from our Navy and Air Force brethren, and EW support as well. So the charity of the Royal Australian Corps of Signals recognises Navy and Air Force communications and EW specialist counterparts and their families. We talk about serving our community by caring, connecting and commemorating, and it is our benchmark for how we deliver that support. So we're very proud that we have a charity that is there to support our people. We have a scholarship fund and a number of initiatives. We've put people into Kokoda. They'll walk the trek fairly shortly in October to mark the work of signalman Norm Ensor, who was a liney on the Kokoda track, and there are a range of other initiatives that we've exercised this year to support our centenary. So I just want to conclude now, which will give you an opportunity for questions if you have them, by offering some personal reflections on the centenary. So for me, I think important to reflect on the contribution of our signallers and the Royal Australian Corps of Signals. A number of our community have lost their lives, killed in action or with wounds or injuries, illness caused by their service. For me, it's important to remember our families who support us. It's important to remember and commemorate the service and sacrifice of those who've served alongside me and those who served before me. This centenary year is an opportunity not only to celebrate, but to recognise service and sacrifice. My family bears scars of people who served as signallers who lost their lives through illness caused by service. So for me, the contribution of the men and women in the Australian Defence Force is important. The contribution of our Royal Australian Corps of Signals personnel and what they do is important. I'd like to think that over a century we've made a difference. I have no doubt that there's more to follow, and I think and hope that you will also be proud of what our Signals community delivers. Thank you. So I'm very happy to take questions if there are any, although I'm mindful of the time.
Malcolm Brown, retired journalist, former serviceman. It seems to me the future of warfare is going to be all about drones, about drone aircraft, drone warships, drone submarines, and have a point where drones will be fighting each other in mid-air, and it seems to me that Signals will eventually compose the majority of the Defence Force, because there's nobody else doing it.
It's an interesting proposition, Malcolm. There's no doubt that drone warfare is very topical at the moment, and certainly the current conflicts see a high use of drones. Absolutely no doubt that to allow drones to operate, you need communication systems and methods of communication. Absolutely no doubt that cyber-enabled warfare contributes to the prosecution of those types of fights. I think you still need boots on the ground, ships at sea and underwater, subsurface, and I still think you need air to achieve that real effect. So drones, I think, are part of the warfare. It makes it very unpleasant for people when they're subjected to drone warfare, but I don't think the rest of it's going to go away. And I think if I said that Signals would dominate the Australian Defence Force and the Australian Army, my brethren from other corps would be very disappointed in my assessment of future conflict. Is that true, General Burr?
You Ken Broadhead, IUSI. There are a number of players in respect of cyber warfare in space, including private companies, and your work is quite wonderful. In fact, Signals have been part of my life. My father did 550 days of continuous service in Signals in World War II. But what sort of a liaison and contacts do you have with the other people responsible for similar things in other domains?
So from a cyber perspective, you wouldn't be at all surprised that there is a coalition effort around cyber. It's very important. We talk about Five Eyes and the need to actually have connected understanding of what the information and cyber domains look like, and the coalition and our partners look at that as a collective. We have a responsibility in our own right to make sure that we understand what's happening on our patch. That's been in place for generations. It's not a new phenomenon. Within the Australian Defence Force, obviously, the fact that all of our cyber capability now sits as a joint capability means that Navy, Army, Air Force cyber is well connected and then facilitates land, maritime and air domains in delivery of a cyber effect, both that defensive operational effect as well as the offensive operational effect. But of course you must be connected to all of the civilian infrastructure, because our power, our water, our electricity grids are all part of our critical infrastructure, and all of that is vulnerable. And so the Australian Defence Force, as we do, contributes to the collective national effort, and I won't go into much about how we affect that, but you can be absolutely certain that we have a part to play in national security, in making sure that everything is affected appropriately. You may be aware that Major General Michelle McGuinness is the National Security Cyber Coordinator. She's an intelligence operator, but has spent decades working and understanding the world that we operate in, and we help the national security effect around cyber. So can we connect better? You can never get it right. You always have to be striving to be more connected, to be one step ahead. I think everyone would agree here that you always feel like you're on the back foot with cyber operations. It's incredibly hard to be ahead of your adversary, but there's people out there that are working really hard on that right now.
Thank you, Brigadier. Now call on Major General Paul Irving, President of RUSI Australia and a former representative Colonel Commandant of the Royal Australian Corps of Signals.
Thank you very much, Alison, and thank you for such an illuminating address on the roller coaster ride of the Royal Australian Corps of Signals over the last 100 years. I think Australians like to champion the underdog, the team that punches above its weight, and I don't think there's any doubt that a very small corps within the Australian Army has punched above its weight the last 100 years. And we're certainly at the top of the tree now, particularly with the emphasis on cyber and space and the space domains. And I'd just like to add one thing to the question that was posed by Ken Broadhead, was that the School of Signals in Watsoni is now the Defence Force School of Signals. It is no longer an Army School of Signals, it's tri-service. And that's an indication of where we're moving in relation to the important domains of cyber and space. So thank you again for coming a long way from at short notice to come and present to us today. I have in the envelope a certificate giving you a year's membership with the Royal United Service Institute in New South Wales, and a lovely scarf with the Corps with our badge on it. So
fantastic.
thank you very much for your presentation.